Sarah had always been the broken one. In a pack that valued strength above all else, she was a crack in the foundation, a flaw in the bloodline. The alpha's daughter who couldn't shift, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything but exist as a constant reminder of weakness. Her father had tolerated her for 21 years. Today, his tolerance had run out. "You'll go to the Lycan king as tribute," he'd announced that morning, his voice as cold as the winter wind howling outside. "Perhaps he'll find some use for you. Perhaps he'll put you out of your misery. Either way, you'll no longer be my burden." Sira hadn't cried. She'd learned long ago that tears only made things worse. Instead, she'd packed her meager belongings into a small bag, wrapped herself in the thinnest cloak her stepmother would allow her to take, and climbed into the wagon without a word. Now, hours later, she stood at the gates of the Lycan king's castle, shivering in the bitter cold, and wondered if death might be a mercy. The guards looked at her with something between confusion and pity. She knew what they saw: a wisp of a woman, too thin, too pale, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Not a tribute, a cast-off. Garbage wrapped in a worn cloak and delivered to their king's doorstep. "State your business," one of them said, though his tone suggested he already knew. "I'm—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. "I'm tribute. From the Silver Ridge pack. Alpha Thornwood sent me." The guards exchanged glances. One of them sighed. "Wait here." She waited. The cold seeped through her thin cloak, her worn boots, her threadbare dress. Her fingers went numb. Her lips turned blue. Still she stood, because standing was all she knew how to do anymore. Stand and endure. Stand and survive. Stand until you can't, and then stand some more. When the castle doors finally opened, she expected servants, soldiers, someone to drag her to the dungeons or toss her in the kitchens or put a blade to her throat and end the embarrassment her father had sent. She did not expect the Lycan king himself. He descended the steps like a force of nature given form. Tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the grey winter sky. Dark hair fell across a face carved from stone and shadow, features harsh and commanding and ancient with power. His eyes were the deep amber of autumn leaves, and when they landed on her, she felt the weight of centuries pressing against her soul. She dropped into the lowest curtsy she could manage, which wasn't much given how badly her legs were shaking. "Rise." The command was absolute. She obeyed without thinking, lifting her gaze to find him standing 3 paces away, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're the tribute from Silver Ridge?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Alpha Thornwood's daughter." She flinched at the title. "In blood only, Your Majesty. He's made it clear I'm no daughter of his." Something flickered across the king's face. "And why is that?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked. No one had ever cared enough to wonder why the Alpha's own child had been discarded like spoiled meat. "I'm weak," she said simply. "I can't shift. My wolf never manifested. In a pack of warriors, I'm nothing." The king said nothing. His amber eyes moved over her, not with hunger or cruelty, but with something that looked almost like assessment. She forced herself to hold still, to not shrink beneath his gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to make herself smaller. "You're half frozen," he said finally. "I'm fine, Your Majesty." "You're blue." "I've been colder." That strange expression crossed his face again, almost like pain, almost like recognition. "Come inside." He turned, clearly expecting her to follow. Now, before the cold finishes what your father started." She shouldn't have been surprised by the warmth inside the castle. Kings lived in luxury. She knew that. But after years of sleeping in the coldest room of her father's house, of being given the last scraps of food and the thinnest blankets, the heat that enveloped her felt like a physical embrace. Her legs buckled. She didn't fall. Strong hands caught her, steadied her, held her upright when her body tried to crumple. The Lycan king was touching her, actually touching her, his grip firm but impossibly gentle. "When did you last eat?" His voice was close, rough. "I don't—" She tried to think through the fog in her mind. "Yesterday? The day before? I'm not sure." A growl rumbled through his chest. Not directed at her, she realized. Directed at the circumstances, at her father, at whoever had allowed her to arrive at his gates, starving and frozen. "Brennan!" The name was snapped like a whip, and a man appeared from somewhere. A servant, broad and efficient. "Have food brought to the small dining room? Soup, bread. Nothing too heavy. And send for the healer." "At once, Your Majesty." The king was moving before Sarah could process what was happening. He swept her off her feet, literally lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing, and carried her through corridors she was too dazed to memorize. "You don't have to. I can walk." "You can barely stand." "I'm fine." "You're not." He looked down at her, and the intensity in his amber eyes stole her breath. "You haven't been fine in a very long time, but you're here now, and that changes." She didn't understand. None of this made sense. She was supposed to be tribute, a gift, an offering, a thing to be used however he saw fit. Instead, she was being cradled in the arms of the most powerful Lycan in existence, while he carried her toward warmth and food and something that looked terrifyingly like care. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop it. He didn't answer immediately. They reached a room, smaller than she'd expected, cozy even, with a fire roaring in the hearth and a table already being set with dishes that made her empty stomach clench. He set her down in a chair by the fire, close enough that the heat washed over her like a wave. "Your father sent you here as an insult," the king said, straightening. "A broken daughter from a minor pack. A message that Silver Ridge doesn't think I'm worth their best." Syrah's cheeks burned. "I know what I am, Your Majesty." "I don't think you do." He crouched before her, bringing himself to her level, and the sight of this ancient king kneeling at her feet made her heart stutter in her chest. "Your father sees weakness because you cannot shift. But I've lived for over 500 years. And I've learned that true weakness has nothing to do with claws or fangs." "I don't understand." "You will." He reached out, and his fingers, warm, careful, impossibly gentle, brushed a strand of frozen hair from her face. "You say you're weak, Sarah of Silver Ridge, that you have no strength to offer." "It's true." "Then I'll be your strength." The words were simple, certain. A vow spoken like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Until you find your own, however long that takes." Syrah stared at him. This king, this legend, this ancient, powerful being who should have seen her as trash and instead was looking at her like she was something worth protecting. "Why?" she asked again, because she couldn't help it, because nothing about this made sense. The Lycan king rose to his feet, amber eyes never leaving hers. "Because I know what it is to be deemed worthless," he said quietly, "and I know how wrong those judgments can be." Then he was gone, sweeping from the room with a promise to return, leaving Sarah alone with a fire and a feast, and a heart that had forgotten how to hope suddenly, painfully, remembering. Sarah ate until her stomach ached. She tried to pace herself. Years of rationed meals had taught her the dangers of eating too fast after starving. But the soup was rich, and the bread was warm, and her body screamed for more, more, more. By the time she set down her spoon, she'd emptied 3 bowls and half a loaf. The healer came and went. An older woman with kind eyes who tutted over Sarah's malnourished frame, the bruises on her arms from her stepbrother's training sessions, the old scars that mapped her history in silver lines across her skin. Nothing that won't heal with time and proper care, the healer announced to someone behind her. Sarah turned to find the king standing in the doorway, his amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She needs rest, good food, and to be kept warm. The cold did some damage, but she's stronger than she looks. She'll have everything she needs. The healer left. The king remained. Sarah straightened in her chair, suddenly aware of how she must look, thin and pale and pathetic, crumbs on her borrowed dress, her hair still half frozen and tangled. Not exactly the image of a proper tribute. "You don't have to keep checking on me, Your Majesty." She forced her voice to stay steady. "I'm sure you have more important matters to attend to." "I don't. The kingdom can wait." He moved into the room, settling into the chair across from her with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. This close to the fire, the light caught the planes of his face, softening the harsh edges. "How do you feel?" "Better. Thank you. The food was—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. "More than I've had in weeks. More than I deserved. More than anyone has ever given me without wanting something in return." "It was necessary," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "You arrived at my gates half dead. I don't let people die on my doorstep." "Is that why you carried me? To protect your reputation?" The words came out sharper than she intended. A test, she realized. She was testing him, waiting for the mask to slip, for the cruelty to emerge. It always emerged eventually. But the king just smiled. A small thing, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from stone to something almost approachable. "Partially," he admitted. "Also because you weighed less than my winter cloak and looked like you might shatter if I let you walk." "I'm stronger than I look." The healer said the same thing. He leaned back, studying her. "She also said you have scars. Old ones. Too many for someone your age." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her forearm, covering the worst of them through her sleeve. "Training accidents." "Training for what? You said you can't shift." "My stepbrother thought he could force my wolf to manifest if he pushed hard enough." The words tasted like ash. He was wrong. Something dangerous flickered through the king's amber eyes. There and gone, so fast she might have imagined it. But his voice remained calm when he spoke. "Your stepbrother sounds like someone I'd enjoy meeting." "He'd enjoy that less than you think." "I'm counting on it." Sarah didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know what to do with any of this. The warmth, the food, the king sitting across from her like she was worthy of his attention. It felt like a trap. Everything that seemed good always turned out to be a trap. "What do you want from me?" She asked the question she'd been dreading since he'd first looked at her. "I know I'm tribute. I know what that usually means. If you want me to warm your bed, or scrub your floors, or... I want you to rest." She blinked. "What?" "Rest." He said it slowly, like she might not understand the word. "Recover. Eat. Sleep. Let your body heal from whatever your pack put it through. And after that? After that, we'll see. He rose from his chair, moving toward the door. You'll have rooms in the guest wing. Clothes will be provided. You're free to explore the castle, the grounds, anywhere you'd like. The only doors locked to you are my war room and the treasury, and those are locked to everyone. Sarah stood, her legs steadier now. I don't understand. You're treating me like a guest, not a tribute. Because you're not a tribute. He turned back to face her, and the firelight caught his eyes, turning amber to molten gold. Your father sent you here to insult me, to show the other packs that Silver Ridge doesn't fear the Lycan king. He expected me to either kill you or send you back in disgrace. A smile crossed his features, cold, sharp, nothing like the warmth he'd shown her. I intend to do neither. Then what do you intend? To give you something you've clearly never had. He held her gaze, and the weight of it pressed against her chest. A choice. The word hung in the air between them. Choice. Such a small word for something so enormous. I don't know what choices I have, she admitted quietly. That's all right. His voice softened. We'll figure them out together. For now, just focus on healing. Everything else can wait. He called for a servant, a young woman named Mira, who smiled at Sarah like she was already welcome, and instructed her to show Sarah to her rooms. But before Sarah could follow, something made her stop. Your Majesty. He paused at the threshold. You said you know what it is to be deemed worthless. She shouldn't push. She knew she shouldn't push. But the words spilled out anyway. What did you mean? For a long moment, he didn't answer. His back remained turned, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the corridor's torchlight. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, heavy, with something old. I was the runt of my litter, he said. The smallest, the weakest. My father tried to drown me the night I was born. He thought I would bring shame to his bloodline. A pause. He was wrong about that too. Then he was gone, disappearing down the corridor before she could respond. Sarah stood frozen, the fire crackling behind her, his words echoing in her mind. The Lycan king, this ancient, powerful, terrifying king, had been deemed worthless once, had been marked for death by his own father, had been exactly what she was now. And he had survived. He had thrived. He had become something so far beyond what anyone expected that his name was spoken with reverence across every territory. If he could do that, then maybe. She cut the thought off before it could fully form. Hope was dangerous. Hope was a weakness she couldn't afford. But as Mira led her through warm corridors to rooms larger than her father's entire house, as she sank into a bed softer than clouds and pulled blankets around her that actually kept out the cold, she couldn't quite silence the small voice in the back of her mind. Maybe, just maybe. She fell asleep with those words on her lips and the ghost of amber eyes watching over her dreams. The nightmares found her on the fourth night. Sarah woke screaming, tangled in sheets that felt like hands, her stepbrother's voice echoing in her ears. Shift. Shift, you worthless thing. Show me you're worth keeping alive. She couldn't breathe. The darkness pressed in from all sides, and she was back in that cellar, the one they'd locked her in when she failed, the one where she'd spent days alone in the black, wondering if this was when they'd finally let her die. Light flooded the room. She flinched, throwing her arms up, expecting a blow. Instead, she heard a voice, deep, steady, impossibly calm. Sarah, you're safe. You're in my castle. No one is going to hurt you. The Lycan king stood in her doorway, a robe thrown hastily over his shoulders, his amber eyes bright with concern. Behind him, a servant hovered uncertainly, candle in hand. "Leave us," the king said without looking back. The servant vanished. Sarah couldn't stop shaking. She tried to speak, to apologize for waking him, for being weak, for being exactly the burden her father had always said she was. But the words wouldn't come. Only ragged breaths and the hot slide of tears down her cheeks. He crossed the room slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't. He sat on the edge of her bed, close, but not touching, and waited. "I'm sorry." She finally managed to force the words out. "I didn't mean to wake you. I'm fine. It was just a dream." "It wasn't just a dream." His voice was gentle. "And you don't need to apologize for having nightmares, Sarah. Not here. Not to me. In my father's house, crying was punished." She didn't know why she said it. The words simply fell out, raw and unfiltered. Weakness was punished. If I woke anyone with my screaming, I'd be locked in the cellar until I learned to be silent. Something shifted in the king's expression. That dangerous flicker she'd seen before, the one he kept carefully banked. This time, it burned longer. "Your father," he said slowly, "is a fool and a coward who will one day answer for what he's done. But that's a conversation for another time." He reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder, asking permission. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steady. The touch was grounding, real. A tether pulling her back from the darkness that still clawed at the edges of her mind. "I used to have nightmares too," he said quietly. "When I was young, I'd dream of the river, the cold, the dark, my father's hands holding me under. I'd wake up unable to breathe, convinced I was drowning." Sarah looked at him, really looked, past the power and the ancient eyes and the fearsome reputation. Beneath it all, she saw something familiar, something broken that had learned to mend itself. "How did you make them stop?" "I didn't. Not entirely." His thumb traced a small circle on her shoulder, soothing without demanding. "But they faded, over time, as I built a life that proved them wrong, as I surrounded myself with people who saw my worth even when I couldn't see it myself. I don't know if I have any worth to see." The words came out small, defeated. The confession she'd never spoken aloud, because speaking it would make it true. The king's hand tightened on her shoulder. Not painful, anchoring. "Then let me tell you what I see." His amber eyes held hers, refusing to let her look away. "I see a woman who survived 21 years in a pack that wanted her dead. I see someone who endured cruelty that would have shattered others and somehow kept going. I see strength, Sarah, the kind that doesn't come from claws or fangs, the kind that comes from refusing to break, no matter how hard the world tries to break you. I feel broken." Feeling broken and being broken are not the same thing. He shifted closer, his presence a wall between her and the nightmares. "You've been told your whole life that you're worthless. Of course you feel broken. But feelings can lie. The people who raised you lied. And I am telling you the truth when I say that you are not what they made you believe." Sarah's chest ached. Something was cracking inside her, something she'd built to protect herself, and she didn't know whether to hold it together or let it shatter. "Why do you care?" The question was barely a whisper. "You don't know me. You have no reason to." "I know enough." He cut her off, but gently. I know that you deserve better than what you've been given. I know that every moment I spend with you makes me want to burn Silver Ridge to the ground for what they did. And I know. He stopped, jaw tightening like he was holding something back. What? His eyes searched her face. Whatever he found there made him exhale slowly. Some internal battle decided. I know that you're my mate. The world stopped. Sarah stared at him, the word echoing in her skull. Mate. The sacred bond. The one connection that even someone like her had heard whispered about in reverent tones. That's not possible. Her voice came out strangled. I can't even shift. I'm not whole. How could I be anyone's mate, let alone… The bond doesn't care about shifting. He moved closer still, and now his hand rose to cup her face, cradling her cheek like she was something precious. It doesn't care about strength or power or any of the things your pack valued. It cares about souls. And yours called to mine the moment you set foot in my territory. You've known this whole time? Since you stumbled through my gates, half frozen and terrified, and still holding yourself together through sheer force of will. His voice dropped, rough and raw. I've known since the moment I caught your scent, and everything in me screamed her finally. Her. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready to hear it. Because you needed time to heal before I added this weight to your shoulders. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she hadn't felt fall. I would have waited years to tell you, if that's what you needed. I would have waited forever. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This ancient, powerful king had known she was his mate from the first moment, had carried her in his arms, fed her, clothed her, given her space and time and kindness, all while knowing, all while waiting. I don't know how to be anyone's mate, she admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to be anything but weak. Then we'll learn together. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her lips. I told you I would be your strength. I meant it. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll show you that you've had your own strength all along. She should pull away, should put distance between them, give herself time to think, to process, to protect herself from hoping too much. Instead, she leaned into him. His arms came around her, pulling her close, tucking her against his chest like she belonged there. And maybe she did. Maybe this was what belonging felt like. Warmth and safety, and a heartbeat steady against her ear. I'm scared, she whispered into his chest. I know. His lips pressed against her hair. I'll be scared with you. They stayed like that until the sun rose, and when Sarah finally fell back asleep, the nightmares didn't return. 2 weeks of peace shattered on a cold afternoon. Sarah was in the library when she heard the commotion, raised voices echoing through the stone corridors, the clatter of armored boots, and beneath it all, a voice that made her blood turn to ice. Where is she? Where is my sister? Corvin, her stepbrother, the one who'd left those scars on her arms, who'd locked her in cellars and called it training, who'd smiled every time she failed to shift because it gave him another excuse to hurt her. He was here. Sarah's body moved before her mind could catch up. She was out of her chair, pressing herself into the shadows between bookshelves, making herself small, making herself invisible. Old habits, old survival instincts. Her hands trembled so violently she had to clench them into fists. He can't take you. The king won't let him. You're safe here. But the voice in her head sounded like a lie. She forced herself to move. to walk toward the great hall instead of away from it. She didn't know why, maybe because running had never saved her, maybe because some small part of her was tired of hiding, maybe because she needed to see if this new life was real, or just another beautiful dream waiting to become a nightmare. The great hall was chaos contained. Corvin stood in the center, flanked by two of his pack's warriors. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, broad, handsome in the way of a blade. All sharp edges and cold eyes. The kind of man who smiled while he hurt you. Around him, the king's guards formed a loose circle, hands on weapons, waiting for the order to strike. And at the head of the hall, seated on his throne like he'd been carved from the stone itself, sat the Lycan king. His amber eyes found Sarah the moment she stepped through the doorway. "Ah, there she is." Corvin turned, and his smile made her stomach lurch. "Hello, sister. Did you miss me?" Sarah couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around the words, the old fear strangling her voice the way it always had. "She's not your sister." The king's voice cut through the hall, cold and absolute. "And she's not going anywhere with you." Corvin laughed. "With respect, your majesty, she belongs to Silver Ridge. Our father sent her as tribute, yes, but he's changed his mind. He wants her back." "I don't care what your father wants. You should." Corvin's smile sharpened. "The other packs are watching. They're wondering why the great Lycan king is keeping a worthless, broken girl as if she matters. If you return her, we'll forget this whole unfortunate situation. If you don't—" "If I don't? What?" The king rose from his throne, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop. "You'll declare war? Silver Ridge against the crown?" He descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing like a death knell. "I've crushed rebellions started by packs 3 times your size, boy. I've lived through 5 centuries of challenges from wolves who thought they could take what's mine. Your father's pack would be ash before the first snow melted." Corvin's confidence flickered, just for a moment. Then he rallied, because cruelty always made men like him brave. "She's not worth a war," he said. "She's nothing. She can't even shift. You're embarrassing yourself over a broken—" "Finish that sentence." The king's voice had dropped to something barely human. "Please, give me a reason." Silence stretched through the hall. The guards' hands tightened on their weapons. Corvin's warriors shifted nervously behind him, and Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, watching 2 worlds collide over her, the old one that had tried to destroy her, and the new one that had given her a reason to live. "Sarah." The king's voice was different now, softer. He wasn't looking at Corvin anymore. He was looking at her, and his amber eyes held something that made her chest ache. "Come here." She should be terrified. Corvin was right there, watching. And walking toward the king meant walking past him, meant making herself visible in every way she'd spent her life avoiding. But her feet were moving, carrying her across the hall, and she realized with sudden clarity that she wasn't walking away from Corvin. She was walking toward Cale. She stopped at the base of the throne, close enough to feel the heat radiating from the king's body, close enough to see the war raging behind his eyes, the beast that wanted to tear Corvin apart and the man holding it back. "This is your choice," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "If you want to go with them, I won't stop you. It would kill me, but I won't stop you. You have to choose, Sarah. Freely. What do you want?" What did she want? For 21 years, no one had asked her that. No one had cared. She'd been a burden, an embarrassment, a thing to be endured or discarded. Her wants had never mattered. But they mattered now. To him. She turned to face Corvin, her stepbrother, who had hurt her in ways that still woke her screaming in the night. He was smiling again, confident, certain she would do what she'd always done: submit, obey, disappear into the role they'd carved out for her. Something hot and fierce kindled in her chest. No. The word came out stronger than she expected. Corvin's smile faltered. No, he repeated. I'm not going back. She took a step toward him, and for the first time in her life, she didn't make herself small. I'm not your sister. I'm not your pack's property. I'm not the broken thing you spent years trying to destroy. Sera. My name is Sera of the King's Court. The title felt right on her tongue. True. And I am staying exactly where I am. Corvin's face twisted. The mask of charm crumbled, revealing the cruelty beneath. He lunged toward her and found himself on his knees, the Lycan king's hand around his throat, claws dimpling the skin just enough to draw blood. You were warned. The king's voice was barely recognizable. More growl than speech. You were given every chance to leave with your life, and you chose to reach for what's mine. Please, Corvin choked. Give me one reason. The king's amber eyes burned gold. One reason I shouldn't end the Silver Ridge bloodline right here. Kale. Sarah's hand touched his arm. The muscle beneath her fingers was coiled steel, trembling with the effort of restraint. She felt the beast beneath his skin, raging, hungry, desperate to protect her. Let him go. The king's eyes snapped to hers. Wild, barely human. He hurt you. I know. She held his gaze, steady despite the fear still flickering in her veins. But I don't want his blood on your hands. I don't want him to have that power over us. Something shifted in those golden depths. The beast retreated, inch by inch, and the man emerged. He released Corvin, who crumpled to the floor, gasping. Get out. The king's voice was cold again, controlled. Tell your father that Sarah is under my protection. She is my mate, and any move against her is a move against the crown. If I see you in my territory again, I won't be merciful. Corvin scrambled to his feet and fled, his warriors close behind. The hall fell silent. Sarah's legs gave out. She would have fallen, but strong arms caught her, pulled her close, held her against a chest still heaving with barely controlled rage. You chose, Kale breathed against her hair. You chose to stay. I chose you. She looked up at him, this ancient king who had been ready to tear apart her tormentor and had stopped because she asked. I choose you, Kale. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll have me. His mouth found hers. The kiss was fierce and desperate, tasting of relief and hunger and something that felt terrifyingly like forever. She melted into him, gave herself over to the warmth and safety and overwhelming rightness of being exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. Forever, he promised. I'll have you forever. The bonding ceremony was held on the first day of spring. Sarah had wanted something small, quiet, a private exchange of vows witnessed only by those who mattered. But Kyle had insisted on a gathering, and when she'd asked why, his answer had silenced her protests. Because everyone needs to see, he'd said, his amber eyes burning with quiet intensity. Every pack, every noble house, every person who ever looked at you and saw nothing. They need to see what you've become, what you always were. So she stood now in the great hall, dressed in a gown of deep crimson that made her feel like fire given form. The seamstresses had worked for weeks, and the result was something she barely recognized in the mirror. Elegant, regal, powerful, not broken, not worthless. A queen. The hall was packed. Representatives from every territory had come to witness the Lycan king take his mate. Sarah recognized some of the faces, allies Cale had introduced her to over the past months, lords and ladies who had welcomed her with varying degrees of warmth. And in the back, standing stiff and pale, stood her father. Alpha Thornwood had received his summons 3 weeks ago. Attendance was not optional. He'd arrived with her stepmother and Corvin, the latter still bearing faint scars on his throat from Cale's claws, and had spent the entire visit avoiding Sierra's gaze. She didn't avoid his. She met his eyes now, across the crowded hall, and let him see exactly what his cruelty had created. Not a broken girl, not a burden. A woman who had found her worth in the ashes of everything he'd tried to destroy. His jaw tightened. His face went grey. Good. The ceremony began. Kyle took her hands in his grip warm and steady, his amber eyes soft, with something that still made her breath catch even after months of seeing it. Before these witnesses, the officiant intoned, before the moon and the ancient laws that bind our kind, do you, Kyle, king of the Lycans, claim this woman as your mate? I claim her. His voice rang through the hall, absolute and unwavering. I have claimed her since the moment I saw her. I will claim her until my last breath and beyond. And do you, Sarah, accept this claim? Do you bind yourself to this male in partnership and in bond, from this day until your souls return to the stars? Sarah looked at the man before her, the king who had carried her from his gates when she couldn't walk, who had fed her, clothed her, given her space to heal, who had held her through nightmares and told her she was strong when she felt anything but, who had been ready to start a war for her and had stopped because she asked. I accept. Her voice didn't waver. I bind myself to him freely, completely, and without reservation. He is mine, and I am his. Kale's breath caught. Even now, even after everything, her acceptance still struck him like a physical blow. Then by the ancient laws, the officiant declared, you are bonded. What the fates have joined, let no force tear asunder. Kyle kissed her, and the hall erupted into cheers. But Sarah barely heard them. All that existed was his mouth on hers, his arms around her, the feeling of finally belonging somewhere, to someone. The celebration lasted hours. Sarah danced until her feet ached, accepted congratulations from nobles who bowed to her like she'd been born to this, and drank wine that tasted like victory. Through it all, Cale stayed close, a hand on her waist, her back, her shoulder. Always touching, always there. It was near midnight when her father approached. Sarah felt him before she saw him, that familiar tightening in her chest, the old fear trying to claw its way back. But Cale's arm was around her, solid and warm, and she let his strength bolster hers. Alpha Thornwood. Cale's voice was polite. His eyes were not. Your Majesty. Her father's bow was stiff, forced. I wanted to congratulate you, both of you. The words sounded like they were being dragged across broken glass. Did you? Sarah heard herself speak, and the steadiness of her own voice surprised her. That's interesting. I seem to remember you calling me a burden, an embarrassment. You sent me here hoping I would die. Her father's face reddened. Sarah, you were wrong. She stepped forward, out of Cale's embrace. standing on her own. About me. About everything. You looked at me and saw weakness because I couldn't shift. But I survived you. I survived Corvin. I survived 21 years of being told I was nothing. And I am still standing. I did what I thought was best for the pack. You did what was easiest for you. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And now you'll live with it. You'll go back to Silver Ridge, and every time you sit in your hall, you'll know that the daughter you threw away became a queen, that the broken girl you couldn't wait to be rid of is now mated to the most powerful Lycan alive. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to something only he could hear. I hope it haunts you. I hope you see my face every time you close your eyes. And I hope you understand, finally, exactly how wrong you were. She turned and walked back to Kale, leaving her father standing pale and silent behind her. The king's arm came around her immediately, pulling her close. That was magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I learned from the best. He laughed, low and warm, and led her away from the celebration, away from the watching eyes and whispered conversations, to the quiet of their chambers. That night, he showed her exactly how cherished she was. Every touch a promise, every kiss a vow. He worshipped her with his hands, his mouth, his body, until she forgot she had ever felt worthless. After, tangled together in silk sheets, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she said the words she'd been holding back. I love you. He went still. Then his arms tightened around her, fierce and trembling. Say it again. I love you, Kale. Again. She laughed, the sound bright and free. I love you. I love you. I... He silenced her with a kiss, deep and desperate. I love you, he breathed against her lips. I have loved you since you stumbled through my gates, half frozen and defiant. I will love you until the stars burn out and the world ends. You are my heart, Sarah, my home, my everything. She fell asleep in his arms, warm and whole, and loved. 3 years later, Sarah stood on the balcony of the Queen's chambers, watching her daughter take her first wobbly steps across the nursery floor. Lily had her father's amber eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. Arms wrapped around her from behind, a familiar warmth pressing against her back. She's walking, Kale murmured, wonder in his voice. She's been trying for weeks. She finally figured it out. She's determined, like her mother. Sarah leaned back into him, watching their daughter toddle toward them with a grin that showed 2 tiny teeth. So much had changed. She had changed. The frightened, broken girl who had been sent away for being weak was gone. In her place stood a queen, a mother, a woman who had found her strength not in claws or fangs, but in the courage to keep going when everything tried to stop her. And beside her, always, stood the king who had seen her worth when no one else could. I love you, she said softly. I love you more. Impossible. He laughed, pressing a kiss to her hair, and together they watched their daughter take another step toward them. She had been sent away for being weak, and she had found someone who became her strength until she discovered her own. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale of fated mates, powerful kings, and love that conquers all. Leave a comment telling us your favorite moment, and we'll see you in the next story.